Welcome to JLife with Daniel. I'm your host, Rabbi Daniel Levine. Okay, well, as this is the first episode in this podcast, I wanted to spend a couple minutes introducing myself and talking a little bit about what I hope this podcast will be all about. My name is Daniel Levine. I currently live in Irvine, California, and I am the rabbi for Hillel in Orange County. I work for a congregation called Temple Beth Tikva, and I also teach a course in Jewish studies at UC Irvine. In terms of my background, I actually like to joke that I span the entire denominational spread of the American Jewish community. My background is in the modern Orthodox community, but I have significant experience in both the conservative and the Reform movement over my years, which I think has really brought me to a place where I can understand the diversity and multiplicity of perspectives that the American Jewish community brings to the table on any one issue. And I think this is really important. I think to some extent, this is becoming a lost art, not just in the Jewish community, but in wider society writ large. You know, we're truly at a crossroads in Jewish history. I think scholars and hundreds and thousands of years from now are going to be looking at this specific moment, the early 21st century, in terms of both the American and Israeli Jewish community, and realizing that this is a crucial inflection point for both how we perceive the Jewish past and where we want to go in the Jewish future. In terms of the American side of the world, the American Jewish community, as we know, is becoming increasingly diverse, increasingly politically polarized, increasingly religiously polarized, and increasingly socially disparate. We know that the famous Pew Report study that came out in 2020 noted that in the American Jewish community, the two poles, and when I say the two poles, I mean on the one side, the Orthodox community, and on the other side, what people like to joke as the religious nuns, meaning Jews who say they are Jewish but of no specific religious denomination, are both growing, and all movements in the middle, be it the conservative, reform, reconstructionist, and anything else, on the decline. This actually follows wider trends in the country of the two poles on any issue, be it politics, be it religion, be it any type of social issues, are rising while it's becoming increasingly more difficult to have any type of middle or nuanced position. People are being driven to one end of the spectrum or another, and I think it's crucial that the Jewish community attempts to rebuild a center, both in terms of the Jewish community in America, in terms of Judaism, and really in terms of every issue that arises in the world writ large. On the opposite side of the world, in Israel, we know that there's been recent political tensions. Israel has seen a huge uptick and increase in terrorism over the past couple years, possibly leading Israel to have just elected the most right-wing government in Israel's history, both in terms of politics and in terms of religion. This rise of what many are considering to be the far right in Israel has been immediate concern for much of the American Jewish community, as both the political discourse in Israel is becoming increasingly nationalistic, and social policy in Israel is seeming like it's moving to a place that will try to pigeonhole non-Orthodox American Jewish movements as almost meaningless concerns. The new government in Israel has already mentioned that they are looking to revise the law of return and other social policies that the American and really diasporic Jewish community are stalwart defenders of. The point of this podcast is really to bring guests from all sorts of Jewish and political perspectives and really rehash this ancient art of Jewish conversation. You know, we come from a long line and a long tradition where conversation, debate, in a nuanced and structured way is really at the center of our tradition. Perhaps the central book in Judaism, the Talmud, is full of thousands upon thousands of pages of divergent opinions on everything from nuanced halachic positions about whether or not a fork or spoon are kosher, all the way to big philosophic issues. Perhaps if we imagine in the Talmud the two representatives, right? We imagine Hillel and Chaim. I assume most Jews from any type of Jewish background, one of the first things you get if somebody hands you a source sheet is, here's Hillel and Shammai, look, these two people right? They were both rabbis in the first century. They disagreed on a whole variety of issues, again, from religious to philosophical to political, and they were still able to be friends. Now, there's actually something interesting when we delve in a little bit deeper into Hillel and Shammai. Yes, perhaps the two individuals, Hillel and Shammai, were able to be friends. They had good rapport. As the Talmud said, even though they disagreed on a myriad of issues, their children still maintained relationships and even married one another. But when we actually dig in a little bit deeper into the variety of Talmudic passages involving Hillel and Shammai, we soon get to actually some darker and some more nefarious episodes. There's a specific instance that I'm thinking about that occurs in the Talmud Yerushami, the Talmud that was written in Israel as opposed to the main Talmud, which was written in Babylonia, that actually describes a story of the students of Hillel and the students of Shammai meeting up late night in a study hall and debating a whole series of issues. The Talmud Yerushami says that the students of Shammai were getting so upset about the views and opinions of the students of Hillel that they actually took out weapons and started engaging in a brawl, ending up in several of the students of Beit Hillel actually dead and many more injured. Now I want to take a step back for a moment. We usually hold up Hillel and Shammai as the paradigm of what it means to have nuanced discourse. The famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says that a machloket l'shem shamayim, a debate for the sake of heaven or for a higher purpose, that is a debate that will last, that will withhold the test of both truth and time. And the Mishnah holds up Hillel and Shammai as paragons of this type of debate. So how can it be, I'm wondering, as do all the commentators on the Talmud, that their students so quickly divulged into anger, and not just anger that gave rise to violence? So I want to take another step back and really frame both this Talmudic debate and also, again, what I hope this podcast ends up being over the next several months. Jewish tradition, Judaism, Jewish philosophy does not idealize debate and open conversation. And what I mean by that is Judaism is not naive. That's one of the things that I always get across to students. You can say a lot of things about traditional Judaism. Traditional Judaism is not naive. Judaism has a very realistic view of how the world and how humans work. And Judaism knows that if we have a society where there's a diversity of opinion, especially on fundamental issues that are important, how we run our country, how we operate our politics, what our religious institutions look like, etc., then it could potentially lead to anger, to violence, to different camps, to different tribes, and that could actually result in a situation that the Talmud Yerushami is describing, where there's actually infighting, where you have a Jewish community where there's Jewish on Jewish violence to some extent. But on the other hand, Jewish tradition teaches something extremely profound and important about the need for conversation. That while on the one hand, Jewish tradition does not idealize debate and open conversation, it realizes that for a society to move forward, to progress, to truly be in the search of truth, there's simply no other alternative. We simply need to hear out both the opinions of Hillel and Shammai. We need to listen to what the students of Hillel and the students of Shammai have to say. And yes, we do know that there's a potential pathology in terms of an open marketplace of ideas. It could lead to tribalism. It could lead to hatred from one group to another. Obviously, to the best of Jewish tradition, we try not to have groups split off into two splintering tribes that hate each other. But Jewish tradition also realizes that debate is so important, that it's so important to have a community that has open opinions, that Jewish tradition is willing to take the risk. Because the alternative, a society where there's one view that's enforced top-down, perhaps by a political or religious leader, is much, much worse. And that's a community that's never going to be able to find truth, and that's a community that ultimately will lead to much more violence and hatred than a society that allows the free-flowing of ideas in an open marketplace. Needless to say, on this podcast, we will almost certainly not be delving into the type of fighting that occurred that one day in the attic between Hillel and Shammai students. but I really do want this podcast to serve as an open marketplace for ideas. I love conversation, and I truly believe that conversation is crucial and fundamental, both in terms of Jewish past and Jewish tradition, and in terms of what we want this Jewish community to look like moving forward. So we're going to explore all types of issues. We're going to explore religious issues, political issues, and social issues on this podcast. And I really hope that for people who follow us along for the journey, each and every episode, there's something that challenges you intellectually, that satisfies you philosophically, and that helps you in terms of your own Jewish identity and Jewish journey down the road. Thank you so much, and I'm so excited to be on this journey with you in the JLife with Daniel podcast. If anybody has any questions or comments, or anybody has specific suggestions for topics they would like to see covered, or if anybody is looking to advertise on the podcast, please send me an email at dlevine21@gmail.com. Thank you so much.